You ready to call the meeting into order?
Believe so, sir.
Okay, let me get my glasses on. Today is January the 28th. It's 9:04, according to my watch. And we're meeting with TCO regarding school marshal duties and responsibilities. And I call to order. We have a roll call of members. Do we have a member list? You do? Can you call out the names? And
Constable Jeff Anderson.
Yep.
Deputy John Tutino.
Here.
Craig Besant.
Here.
School Resource Officer Tara Culpepper.
Here.
Deputy Executive Director Antonio Ford. Jim McGregor.
Here.
Frida Moore.
Here.
Assistant Chief John Mueller.
Here.
Chief Danny Perez.
Here.
Chief Ray Mendoza. Robert Salinas. Ryan Wilkins. We have a quorum.
we have 7.
Yes, sir.
Good, we have one. Guess we can get started. I'm Jeff Anderson. I'm the constable for Williamson County, right next door, precinct 2. I know the committee's to start up an advisory situation for the school marshals, and dealing with psychiatric evaluations, when, how often, and all that. I'm honored to be here. I was glad to be picked for this committee, and I hope all of you are as honored as I am. And can we just go around the room and tell us who we are and all that? Is that good?
Certainly.
I had 29 years with Travis County Sheriff's Office, and I retired. And I realized that retirement wasn't for me, so I ran for constable. It was a vacant seat, and I won in 2021. And I just got reelected in my second term. So I've got X amount. I started in 1988, so y'all do the math, 30 plus years, 35 years of law enforcement. I've sat on numerous committees. I am not the expert by any means. I'm going to rely and depend on all of you for help. This is a group effort, so as much input as you can put in, the better, the more the better. And maybe we can come to some kind of consensus on what we're tasked to do.
My name is John Tutino, Deputy Chief of the Lubbock Police Department, Lubbock, Texas. I've been there 20 years, worked my way up through the ranks for a civil service system, so tested several times, worked in pretty much every area of the department. Again, I'm not an expert by any means on the school marshal program, but I'm honored and humbled to be here.
My name's Craig Besant. I'm the Deputy Superintendent at Wiley ISD. I've been there for 32 years. I'm a school marshal. I like to say I'm the first school marshal, but I'm SM3, but that was alphabetical. I know. So, when's he going to retire? When's he going to get out of here? But I'm honored to be on this committee, and I can tell you back in, I want to say 2015 or 2016, we didn't have an official advisory group, but we did meet, talk about the program, if you'll remember, and then we trained some different police academies, 5 at that time at the Alert Training Center. I was part of that training week, and so I've kind of seen the program grow. We started, like I say, in 2014, we've actually used full-time marshals from the beginning. That was the goal of my board, was to vet our existing employees. We have 850 employees, and see if there was anybody that maybe had a background or something in law enforcement or military. If not, then we looked in we have a pretty good pool of retired law enforcement, and we have a military base too. So we've been able to work through that, and we just appreciate all the work that TCO does at limited resources most of the time in budget. And of course, Cullen, worked with him, and Tarrant County, that was the first place we trained. I've done recertification there a couple of times. So everything I think is going great. And I'm excited about the direction we're going. And our Chief Stevens has got a wealth of knowledge that he brings in here. And Cullen, as you know, a great law enforcement officer too. So Gretchen, who's not in here, but knows the ins and outs of everything we do too. So thank y'all.
Hello, I am Tara Culpepper. I am a school resource officer with the city of Everman at Everman ISD. I have been a police officer for 14 years. I have just stepped my foot into school resource. It is a very different aspect of policing altogether. So I am very honored to sit amongst the very high-ranking individuals in this building. So I am very interested to see how this goes.
My name is Danny Perez. I'm the Chief Investigator for the 47th District Attorney's Office for Potter and Armstrong County up in the Texas Panhandle, based out of Amarillo. I retired in 2018 after 34 years at the Amarillo Police Department. I'm not sure why, but I let the district attorney talk me into going back to being an investigator. So I've been there a little over 2 years now. I've also an alert instructor since I guess my coin is number 24. So since part of the inception, I'm also very honored to be for the committee, and hopefully I got some input to put in there, and I'm sure I'm going to gather from everybody else. So thank you very much.
Let's finish with the committee first, if we could.
I'm John Mueller with Granbury ISD. I've been a school marshal since 2020. This is my 11th year in school-based security. Prior to that, I was a deputy sheriff with El Paso County Sheriff's Office in Colorado Springs, not West Texas. Did 26 years there, and we moved out here to Texas in 2018. And we're enjoying the Texas life. So glad to be here. Anything we can do for you from Granbury, we're happy to do it.
I'm Sergeant Moore, Frida Moore. I'm with Humble ISD Police Department under the leadership of Chief Solomon Cook and Assistant Chief Erica Drenay. I've been in law enforcement going on only 9 years. I started my first year with Waller County Sheriff's Office, then moved over to ISD. And like many, I worked myself up from the bottom to where I am now. I'm the training coordinator. I'm over communications and truancy. I'm also a project manager over our best practices program, and just recently assisted the department with beginning a law enforcement academy. So I kind of bring a little bit of knowledge of trying to look in beginning, projects. That seems to be the thing that I enjoy most, as well as knowing a lot about our policies. So I'm interested in what I can bring to the table and what I could take back.
I'm Jim McGregor. I am the training coordinator at the Tarrant County College Law Enforcement Academy. In my 26th year of law enforcement, and we are one of the approved academy training providers for the school marshal program. So I regularly teach both the school marshal, the full 80-hour course, and then the 2-day renewal course.
Miranda.
Hi, I'm Miranda Aguilar, and I'm a legal assistant with TICO.
I am Abigail Sudley, another legal assistant.
Mark Duncan, Assistant General Counsel.
Aaron Heath, Assistant General Counsel.
Colleen Grissom, Deputy Chief over credentialing, education services, field services, and special services, where the Marshal program resides in special services. Trained a bunch of marshals. Initially, we were heavily involved in the original training programs. Oftentimes it was TICO employees doing it with training providers. So Mike Antu and I trained post Santa Fe about 120 marshals ourselves. At the first growth spurt, when it came on, it was we had very few. I mean, Craig was one of about 30, and it stayed that until we hit, the Santa Fe event, and we saw a marked increase. And of course, post Uvalde, we've seen a marked increase in the adoption of the Marshal program. So we appreciate you being here and being part of this committee. Don't want to steal the boss's thunder, but as part of our sunset bill, we were given clear authority to stand up and recommended to stand up these types of advisory committees so that we get the input from the field, from those affected, by the decisions made here. What this committee will do will inform us in publishing our job description that ultimately Marshal candidates will give a psychiatrist or psychologist doing that assessment. So it's an important document that you'll be building to kind of feed that process. Welcome and thank you for your participation.
And I'm Greg Stevens, I'm Executive Director here with TCOL. I'm not the new Executive Director anymore. I was told I can't say that after 12 months. I kind of wanted to do that for 3 years, advocate any problems or issues there might be. I can still be the new one, but I'm not. It's been a great 12 months, and again, a couple things I want to reiterate what Colin said. I really appreciate you all giving of your time, of your energy and your effort. You're all busy people. You've got things going on at your professional lives and in your personal lives. You've all got things going on. It's significant sacrifice, I think, for you to be here and come and help us do this work for the good of Texas law enforcement. And I think ultimately for a nationwide look at it, I hope that Texas is the example that other states look at. It's my earnest goal for Texas to be the example when Nebraska has a question about how best to protect kids and faculty and staff and visitors to a school or whatever, the best pursuit policy. It doesn't matter that they immediately think to call Texas and see what we're doing. So it has implications that are far-reaching, and I appreciate you being a part of that. And also to reiterate what Colin said, what I really liked about coming into this role is how the Sunset Commission was, or how the new sunset legislation dictated that to implement the sunset changes was to seat committees. And those were made up of every discipline in law enforcement, from constable's office, sheriff's office, municipal, state, members of the public, geographically dispersed from the panhandle of the Rio Grande Valley all the way out to far west Texas and a whole other time zone to behind the pine curtain and from the hill country, to make sure that we had the ability to come up with solutions that aren't bureaucratic decisions made here in Austin in this closed building as we handed out edicts that changed everything people were doing. So it's important, and we're carrying that on to not to beyond sunset to make decisions with y'all's input, just as Colin was saying. So it's important. We plan to do these when significant changes come up or significant decisions need to be made. We want to seek that input, and so a lot of people ask to be on the committees. We carefully select the ones that are going to be there, and we'll do that as we go down the way. So thank you. Again, we plan to lean in more heavily on the school marshal program, but it's got to start with, this is the first thing we want to start with, is we do need a definitive job description, what is it that is expected of this role? And so that's what you're here to do, to help us decide that. Also with us, we've got a number of other support staff. Our general counsel, John Beecham, is there. Some of his other attorneys, our IT director, Jessica, is over there. And again, a number of our folks are there to make sure that you guys have everything that you need. So while you're in Austin, if we can help you, whatever you need, please don't hesitate to let us know. And I thank you for the work that you're going to do.
Abigail, did everybody get their certificates in for the Open Meetings Act?
There were
The
just
training certificate?
a few.
One bit of housekeeping, Constable, you should have before you a couple of forms. One is a direct deposit, one is a, the other form is. That's, you're eligible for reimbursement at state rates. You can't put you in the Ritz-Carlton. So for mileage, travel, that was one of the other things that came out in our sunset bill is it asked us to do this, but it also funded us to reduce the impact on you. So if you have any questions with those forms, if you'll get with us, I believe you'll get an email from Ms. Shelley Knight, who handles those things and kind of explains some of those processes. And if you have any issues or concerns, please let us know. But we do want to make sure you get reimbursed for your travel expenses in support of this mission.
On that note, I know we have more meetings that are going to come up that we're going to do either on Zoom or in person. Is this a one-time fill for each meeting if we decide to meet? Say we decide to meet in Lubbock for all of us, do we fill this out each time, or is this a one-time deal?
It should be a single event,
Okay.
you know, so Shelley, correct me if I'm wrong. This is just the initial paperwork that'll lets us
Down the road as well.
reimburse money to you as a result of your travel. So it should be a one-time event. And you are correct. I can tell you, working with general counsel, we don't think this is gonna be a heavy lift because we'll show you some examples of what we've done for peace officers, and we're kind of looking at doing that with the marshals. We can do meetings remotely. What would be preferable to us because all of our IT infrastructure is here. If we take the show on the road, we've got there's a big package that goes with that. So if we do a remote access meeting, we would prefer that the meeting place be here, which probably would mean you as the chair would be here, which is convenient with your locale. And then people could dial in from your respective places around the state. That way we've got the infrastructure already set up, as you can see, to facilitate that. So if we do a remote meeting, we would ask that the meeting place be here, and then folks could tune in remotely. Or it's, option of the committee. If you want to do all the meetings face to face, it's entirely up to you. But as the chief said, we know you're busy people. Both of those options are.
That's a decision we'll have to make as a group. I like the idea, though, of having it here and then bring in those remotely that we need to. They can't travel or don't want to travel. It's a long drive for some, but here's what it is. So with that said, I guess we need to discuss and take action on the what procedures and preliminary matters. Do we need to do that, or I'm going to depend on you now for the rest of the rollout here.
Yeah, but most of our committees, again, just as a reminder, and Aaron or Mark can help me with the legal parts of it. These are open meetings, so we've got to be accessible to the public. That's also why when we set future meeting dates, we have to have enough time. Like we could not meet next week because we couldn't meet the
7-day window
posting. There's one of the things that's in your packet, if you haven't read it already, is a memo kind of stating the charge for the committee, what our goal is, and giving the background. Generally, the meetings are going to be run based on Robert's Rules of Order, which is most state meetings are. If we're taking a vote for record, we have to have a quorum. All of those things apply. So we will do that.
Okay. What's next on our list? Well, we need to discuss and take action on matters related to developing school marshal duties and responsibilities. Open it up to the committee. Let's start discussing it. Anybody have any input?
So can you give us a little direction, Chief, what we're, I mean, because it kind of
I can tell
depends.
you what somewhat has prompted this is that there is inconsistency across the state, obviously. You have, you have a lot of districts. Well, for starters, you have a lot of districts that aren't interested in school marshals at all because they view it as less than the full-blown peace officer because they look at the peace officer as more highly trained. Of course, we say, well, wait a minute, someone that comes out of a BPOC knows how to work traffic crashes and does footprints. Is that something that you're looking for, or is it, or you have crime on the campus, or are you looking for more, hey, I need to protect, I need safety, security? So we need a job description that actually says, here's what a school marshal specializes in, or here's what they do. We have some districts that do have school marshals in a hybrid model with a police agency. We have some that are, come on in, welcome. And we have some that have them, we have some that are, very visible, some more discreet. We have some that are full-time employees doing other duties with the district, and some then their only duties. So I say all that to say it's really wide open across the state. We're looking for more consistency. You're never going to get exactly what a school marshal is doing in the Panhandle compared to down here. So that's the reason that we have seated this committee is because, again, it varies too significantly from place to place, and there's no definitive thing that says this is what a school marshal does or should be doing.
So, in Cullen, in the statute, a school marshal becomes a school marshal to prevent or abate the threat of serious bodily injury or death. Just when you have legal authority to act as, to use deadly force and act as a school marshal, but of course, our full-time school marshals are not sitting in the corner of the cafeteria wearing a ghillie suit waiting for a bad guy. We gotta find something for them to do. Even our existing employees, that's a kind of a dual role. And so, I did bring some job description when I hire someone as a school marshal, but it's none of that. That's only local. There's really nothing that in statute or from your office that would demand that. It's just a hiring process, what previous qualifications, what's required training, what they might do on a day-to-day basis. Basically, it gives you a pyramid that you can hire people and that you can also dismiss them if they don't do what they're supposed to do, just like you would any employee. So I don't know if you want to get in the weeds that much or just a generalized.
Well, I think a couple of things to look at is this committee, nor we, TCO, can change the authority of a school marshal. We can't expand it, we can't reduce it. But what we've got to try and do, and I think you've got an example of the one we did for Texas peace officer job description, just a generic. What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that across that spectrum that the boss talked about, they, for example, ability to use and care for weapons, firearms, and equipment. Okay, that's probably, because they're gonna be armed, that's probably a knowledge, skill, or ability that a school marshal must possess. So I think if you're looking at this is gonna be a document used for mental health evaluation, if you will. It's, how do they deal with stress? Is it, you've got to remain calm under, highly stressful situations. Those are some things I think we can outline as part of this process. And then eventually, you know, the requirement statute is that the person performing the L3 or the psychological exam is supposed to have a job description for what they're evaluating to. We're evaluating this person to fit this role. And so kind of our mission is to say, okay, this is what the role looks like, to give that professional practitioner something to evaluate against, if you will. I think we can put it up on.
And I think most of our people administering the L3 have just been going by basic peace officer. I mean, the ones that I've had, we've used 2 or 3, because they didn't know. They just said, we'll just use what we get, basic peace officers. That was
And we get the same thing.
You get, I'm sure you get those questions.
We recently, to give you kind of a larger backdrop, we recently changed the L2 and L3 process for peace officers to include a reporting of a failure. So now if someone goes in, if you send someone to your psychologist, they are obligated to report a failure to us. Now, that's not a career-ending event. Doesn't mean you'll never be whatever you're being assessed for, because this is true across all of our licenses. But what it does is we get the information from that doctor. So if you send that person to another doctor, we make sure the second doctor sees that evaluation. So they may overrule it. They may say, no, this person's matured, or that stressful event that happened, you know, they lost their father, they had a divorce, whatever it is, right before the last evaluation. They've grown from that, they've healed, whatever it is. Now this person is available. We just want to make sure that that process is done knowingly by the next doctor. The other thing we see is people can learn. So if I go to a psychologist and I answer certain questions truthfully and I get turned down, I learn to amend my answers before I go to the next one. And so we want to make sure that there's some continuity, that evaluation is solid, and that second or third evaluating doctor has the information from the first failure, if there is one. Not obligated to report passage. Only if a doctor deems someone not to be fit for whatever license they're testing for, that's what triggers the notification to TCOL. So that's very new. What we found was we had psychologists refusing to do school marshal because they didn't know what it looked like. Like, okay, I've got, you know, from a peace officer, I get a full personal history statement, for instance, 30-something page document that talks about where you've been, what you've been through, who you're related to. It's very invasive. Okay, school marshals they're not required to do that. So the doctor doesn't have that. Okay. But at minimum, we need to provide them with this job description just to hang some of their decision-making on to determine whether they pass or not. And for the non-school, the school marshal people know this. School marshals get a psychological exam every 2 years. It's part of their recertification. My first L3 and only L3 that counted was in 1985.
We're reevaluating that this week. We want to be clear.
Probably in the fit for duty pipeline. I've had several psychological exams as part of hiring process. The only one that really required for the state, because I've never had more than a 180-day break-in service, occurred in 1985. So school marshals are treated, you know, unique in the fact that they have to have this every 2 years. But we have had, I think it was 5 or 6, with the changes we made to the L3. We've had several psychologists say, I'm not going to do school marshals because I don't know what I'm looking for. So part of the solution we're hoping this committee gives us is something for them to hang that evaluation on. And so that adds some weight to what you're doing. open it up. And I think part of it falls on us as an education thing. We've got to educate these doctors, and we make every attempt to. When they, when we find out someone's refusing to do it, a lot of times they just don't understand, the difference between a marshal and a peace officer. Sometimes we can educate them back into being willing to do those.
I have two questions. In reference to when we're getting ready to generate the descriptions and requirements and different things like that, being a recruiter and doing the interviews for my department, if I have a school marshal, I'm assuming it will go to that level where we're bringing them in our district, we would have to interview them. Will we be able to ask or have the requirements to say, they're required to act if something major a shooting takes place, a school shooting takes place? Or is that a requirement that can be placed on them because they don't take the full curriculum?
Well, when you get to local decision making, who you hire and who you don't, we're kind of out of that equation. So we TCOL are going to look at a state standard. We're going to produce a generic job description. Should Humble ISD decide to employ school marshals, the expectation is the school district is going to say, this is what a marshal looks like for Humble ISD.
Based on our demographic.
These are the things we want to see in that candidate, just like you do, for all of your employees. I expect my bus drivers to have the following skills. I expect them to have clean criminal history, all the minimum state requirements, but you're going to be more specific about what it means to be a school marshal.
And that's required to have rules and regulations.
Which would be above and beyond what this basic fundamental job description would be, I think. That answers your questions. And it would, I think, to your point, set out that, this would read, I think to some degree, that a school marshal is expected to be able to do this, and in extension of that, then they are expected. If they can't do it, that's a problem. If they're unwilling to, unable to, that goes to the fact that they no longer meet that job description. But that would be a local
Must or shall. It may say can in but in your local would say must or shall.
Right.
And you would have that. And at any point, you training or whatever, you didn't think that employed, then that would be, you would have grounds, just like commission standards and anything else.
So
You can
we'll
put all
come
that in there.
generic across the board, and then each demographical area based on the needs of that demographic will make it tailored towards their demographic.
Yes.
So just for my edification, if this is an ignorant question, I apologize. The school marshals are licensed by TCOL. They're non-sworn positions.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Yes.
They're funded by the ISD that hires them.
Trained by
Yeah.
TCO, licensed by TCO, and then there's legislative oversight.
It could help
Yeah, I can
with the
give you,
statute.
I can kind of give you an overview of what school marshals look like. Under Villalba's initial bill, school marshals were going to be school employees who had another job. So they were a teacher, a librarian, an assistant superintendent, a superintendent's counselor. And they would go through 80 hours of training, which is primarily the same handgun familiarity and use that a recruit would get in BPOC. So it's literally from the BPOC, they get the handgun portion of firearm training. There's some use of force expectation, Chapter 9 of the Penal Code, with self-defense, defense of third person, those kind of things. And then there's some statutory work. There's kind of a threat assessment. I mean, there's a portion of it that's proactive or preemptive. And then it's morphed into alert level 1. So they go through response to active shooter. They've always trained that, but now the alert course is part of that 80 hours. So they come out with alert level 1. So their basic training is 80 hours. It's an occupational license, so we regulate it as an occupational license. They're required to have a psychological exam, but not a physical exam. So the physical is not required. have to have the psych every 2 years, and every 2 years they have to come for 16 hours of recurring training, which includes a tune-up on active shooter response, any legal changes, and a firearms requalification. So all of that is statutorily required for marshals. Now, as Greg pointed out, and as the chief pointed out, there's a variation. There's some people still using the original model where this is a teacher with a full-time job with the school who happens to be armed and happens to be trained as a marshal. At the other end of the spectrum, we have open and obvious, open carry, full-time security position with a marshal license. And so there's a great deal of variation. In the initial bill, the requirement, not on the marshal or the district, but the requirement on TCOL, and still a requirement, is that we keep all of the identities confidential. Because again, the original bill was they had to carry concealed. They could identify themselves. Some schools put, hey, we got armed people on campus, big signs out front. But a lot of them chose even other employees, which is kind of risky, even other employees didn't know who some of the marshals were. But there's an obligation when school has marshals that the notification of the sheriff, the local law enforcement agency, if they're in a municipality or multiple municipalities, DPS gets noticed because it all hinges on one of the prerequisites, they must have the state handgun license. And the reason the state handgun license was required is then DPS is doing the criminal history check. That's literally why they have to have the handgun license. If they lose their handgun license from DPS, they lose their marshal license from us. So there's communication back and forth between DPS and TCOL to manage those things. Greg, I mean, lived it long.
Yeah. So it's changed. I mean, the legislation's slow. And, we're in a session right now. We got 2 or 3 things out there. I can tell you in 2014, as we sat in the very first class at Tarrant County Community College, some of these people were still sitting. We were, as that Jason Villalba wrote that bill, we conferred, but we didn't have any idea. And I can tell you it was not funded. So that's why it was existing. They weren't going to pay anybody. And so we knew right off the bat, some of the things that we had in statute wouldn't apply, like, they contradicted each other. One time you had to have your weapon in a locked container, but it had to be within easy reach. So if you were out in the hallway doing your normal duty, you had violated statute. So Governor Abbott actually was the Attorney General at that time, and he gave us some opinions, and we've worked through that slowly but surely. And it just takes a long time because most of our legislators have no idea about the school marshal program or even TCO. They don't really understand how that whole system works. And so I think every time we have a significant event, 2018, Santa Fe, Parkland, and then Santa Fe, we met, we passed Senate Bill 11. I was on Governor Abbott's roundtable. I'm also the board chair of the Texas School Safety Center, which doesn't have anything to do with the Marshall program. So I get a little bit of that other stuff. And then, of course, House Bill 3 with Uvalde, we've incurred all kinds of new things. Security guards, level 3. I mean, it's been a whole change. And then you have that anonymous program out there, Guardians, which is no official program, but started about the same time Sandy Hook with the school marshal program. And so there's not just a whole lot of regulation, and that's the easiest thing. That's what a lot of school districts have done, mostly small. We know 1,200 school districts, 800 of them have less than 3,000 students, and that's the easy one. Get an LTC, bring your gun to school. No required, handgun safety class, whatever that is. DPS will maybe argue about we don't really want to be in charge, but that's just the easiest way. And so they've never known about the Marshall program. And so our program's gained credibility and speed now after so many years, 10 years, but Because we've always felt it was important, I have, to be licensed and have a training entity in charge. That's the key. School marshals are trained by accredited providers, academies, police academies, basically. And we don't get that anywhere else except unless you're a uniformed sworn peace officer. And I think that's important from a perspective of the school district when we're protecting students and staff. I like that we at least know where the base layer is, and TCO's done a great job of those providers have been really good. I think school boards, that's the issue they run into, and it just depends where you're at. So, we've had bills come through there that said that was the only other program we're going to have, one or the other. And so I think what we've seen here recently is maybe a hybrid program with House Bill 3 that said every campus must be served by a school district police officer, school resource officer, or commissioned peace officer. That's the first three things, first three choices. Then that next thing stops down, it says school marshal. That's in your good cause exemption, and then whoever else, whatever, security, whatever. And so I think we know in most of the departments in our area, we don't have enough uniformed police officers for every campus. And so what's the next alternative? I would like to say most definitely some type of school marshal program. It's all about, can you pay your uniformed guys? That's what we're working on. I'll just tell you right now. And so we have SROs at Wiley ISD, but we have school marshals too. Most of my school marshals are former law enforcement, good law enforcement guys that separated. They wanted to work 187 days. They didn't want to work nights. They weren't arresting drug dealers anymore. They became safety and security experts, and I could supplement their retirement and pay them a good wage. I have to compete against 4 universities that have police departments too. So I want to get the best ones. When they leave the PD, I want the best ones. And so that's kind of how it's operated. And so just like Cullen said, now, all of a sudden, in 2014, nobody wanted an SRO on campus. They didn't want a school district police officer. That's a pipeline to prison. Law enforcement's bad. Don't park a car out there. And as these events have progressed, when we, after Uvalde, it's my community is like, and we've had marshals from the beginning, and we've had school resource. They said, we want more visible. We want that guard dog. The sign, okay. We want police cars out front. We want SROs, but we want our community. It's kind of like that security guard at the mall, I think. You see them, you feel safer, you spend more money. My parents drop their kids off. They want to see that. And so that's what we're seeing, a slight trend, maybe in larger schools 4A. So that's a whole new thing for us. And Senator Birdwell's introduced a bill that addresses that. Specifically, we had Paxton put an opinion that allowed that in spite of everything else. And so we'll see how that goes. We got a long way to go. And I mean, there's some other things that address the school marshal program, frangible ammunition, et cetera, that was written in 2012 or actually 2013, because December 7th was Sandy Hook in 2012 and right after that. So times have changed. It's great to have experts to talk about it in here, law enforcement people that know. And of course, it's just a process, I would say, but our demands have changed over the years, I would say, wouldn't you, Cullen?
I think one of the other things for especially our law enforcement folks, if you look at especially from the initial bill, and not much has changed, is the notion of authority. And so there's a very, very narrow bandwidth. In other words, the bad thing starts, the marshal may act with all the authority of a peace officer, bad thing ends, their authority's gone. I mean, they were designed to deal with active attacks on schools to keep, the students, the staff, and visitors safe, specifically targeted to active shooters.
They do have the power to arrest or detain.
Yes.
So I've never arrested anybody. I have detained several subjects, even with loaded firearms. But I would not know the procedure or have the paperwork to do an arrest report. but, so we detain them until we get a uniformed police officer and that.
But even then,
Yeah.
the notion of detention is the bad thing has before any authority.
Yeah.
The detain and arrest means an active shooter, so
So it had to be.
somebody's shooting and you confront them and they go from, being a communist to being a socialist and throw their hands in the air. And that's where you would have detention and arrest. Kids coming in and out, there's marshals doing searches and they would have no more authority than the librarian to search.
That's correct.
There is no specific authority to search. And the problem, we were in the valley, in Kingsville, and one of the things that came up in a roundtable discussion with the feds and all the locals
Brownsville.
and everything else. Oh, yeah, Brownsville. Was the prosecutor saying, we're having problems with marshals, especially when they're former peace officers, messing up criminal cases. Because they're doing searches, they're doing things, and are they searching under the authority that schools have very broad authority to search students to maintain safety and discipline in the school. So if you're, if a principal wants to go search the locker, that's fine, but he can't get the ISD police, you live.
Right.
They can't get the ISD police officer to go over there and search the locker because it's a Fourth Amendment problem. And if they do search it and they find something, a severed hand from a dead body in there, that's tainted evidence. And so, one of the things we're running into, and this prosecutor was talking about, he's the first assistant DA in Brownsville. It's like, I've got several cases that we're struggling with the search and seizure because this marshal was involved. And so we see kind of the expanse, and this is kind of getting down a rabbit hole, but I want to inform the law enforcement people, it's a very narrow bandwidth of authority. It's what's given. Now, the state could certainly expand martial authority, and there may be, I don't know what legislation has occurred thus far. But those are some of the things as the marshal programs go, and especially as the visibility and the expectation that marshals act as security personnel, because that was not their original design. They were not security. They were not breaking up fights when teenagers got in fights. They may or may not be dealing with the grumpy parent who's yelling at that was someone else. That was a school administrator or somebody dealing with that. But as we have the expansion of use, and especially when the marshals has a full-time job, their full-time job is security, we're seeing where the initial statute may not have been definitive enough to outline, what's acceptable and what's not. So that's some of the stuff that's kind of backdropping.
So we had to write in our rules and regulations, administrative searches so our marshals, they're only marshals in the threat of serious bodily injury or death, really. I mean, even though they may be full-time, so they're school operations, whatever, security, safety and security, they do all the audits, So we wrote in there that as a school operations, they have administrative power to do administrative searches because whether or not that would hold up in the valley, our DA would, because mostly it's vapes, as you know. So when those vape sensors go off, we only got one SRO at the high school. We got so many assistant principals, and they're usually tied up in their office. So my marshals, they're the ones that generally can do that with another administrator, with our SRO not being involved in that. That's how we've gotten around, because we do prosecute those. And so that's a local Taylor County decision, but that's how we tried to work around it.
So when it came out with the portion, as you mentioned earlier, with it being unknown for who that person is in the school, when you deal with us, 6A, And we're right in the middle of Precinct 3, Houston Police Department, Harris County Sheriff's Office, Humboldt PD, all these agencies. Something jumps off at one of our campuses, they're coming. And if they are not aware of who that person is, that person now got a bullet on their back.
But we train, of course, with our local, we train, but we wear, so the only two, correct me if I'm wrong, there's only two entities that can wear a uniform, would be a commissioned sworn peace officer or a commissioned security guard. That's what I was told. A marshal actually, unless it goes in statute, is more what they would call duty gear. I was told, don't call it a uniform. And we talked about that at the alert conference. So anyway, but our full-time marshals wear like an SRO, similar to what he wears, except it's our say marshal on the very back, because they declare that they are just same thing. You know, we don't see a guy with a gun with a black polo on walking down the hall. We want to know. And so.
And what they're trained to do, both in initial and recurring, is to go back, because when we stand up a new marshal program, the first thing we tell them to do is, look, call all of your local law enforcement in. And you have to, it's a thing of personal safety. You have to be identifiable, you know, and train with. Most law enforcement agencies want to get into your school to train. And so if you as the marshals will invite them into the school, they will generally, there's some friction and we get some phone calls like, hey, the sheriff doesn't like the marshal concept. So we generally have the discussion with the sheriff, and we're pretty good at talking people into relationship building.
So they treat us at our marshals. It's not that way everywhere, but we train under the Abilene Police Department, under them.
Mm-hmm.
They treat us as a patrol unit. We have Wednesday in service, just like any other patrol unit would, because they know, I mean, they use our facilities. They're coming in. I mean, everything's on the same page. Doesn't mean you're not gonna have blue on blue, but at least we go through the same training, whether you're a former law enforcement, military, or an existing employee. It's got to be on that same page. SO does our certification, well, and that local, and so we do train not as much with SO because we're a municipality, but we do bring in game wards, DPS. You know, same deal. That's I do a little presentation on implementation, and that's how you bring that all together, because it's. I mean, we're the guy, you know, the marshals are the ones that have the keys. They're the ones that know the building, and that's your best chance to get to work and make it work. And plus, all my marshals carry a police radio. So we talk directly to dispatch, which is a little bit unusual, but communication was a big problem in Uvalde. And so you kind of want to know what's happening immediately and have the first person or two or whatever you have. And so we've done quite a bit of training with that aspect of it.
So under that very narrow scope of authority, do they have qualified immunity?
They do have it's in statute. We have qualified immunity, you know, as long as you do what you're trained to do, just like anybody else. School marshals are the only entity besides uniformed police officers that can belong to CLEAT. That's important. So you know, I'm just saying that's because of TICO, because TICO licenses us. They have commission standards. They have a training standard. None security guardians, no. And I think that's important, especially for my former law enforcement people that think that's important. You know, we know, you know, if we're involved in some kind of an event, I mean, that's important. And I mean, there's a lot of things, you know, go to the grand jury, you know, we know all that. Trainings.
So those are all, so I love all of that conversation. Now, what does that look like maybe in bullet points on
I don't know.
I don't know if anybody's been taking notes. I see a bunch of pens going and writing. So how do we couch all of that into, here's what a school marshal generically across the state is expected to do, what they look like?
I mean, it's got to be something like you're putting up there, I think, in small form and not into the weeds, I would think.
It's got to be substantially similar to a peace officer.
Right.
I mean, it's indistinguishable for me. The expectations are exactly the same for a school marshal as we expect from any peace officer. especially. in
Yes and
criminal
no, because with the Marshal, like you said, the difference between our Bible word shall as opposed to can and must is a little bit different, where we don't have the opportunity to turn away from criminal activity that's taking place in the school. We don't have the opportunity to be like, well, I changed my mind, I don't wanna engage in this shooting right now. I wanna, go home to my kids. We don't have that opportunity. However, depending upon what they're doing, if they're on the school staff as a teacher, that changes also some of their requirements and what they do, as opposed to, like you said, if they're working as a security officer and they're under the umbrella of the police department. We have security officers and police officers. Our security officers dress like this, however, they don't carry. We don't have bonded police, security officers. So it kind of changes that a little bit on that round. So if they're on the school side, them carrying, it's gonna fall back to that avenue where you said it has to be in close proximity, cause you're ununiformed and carrying in the school, which is gonna raise a lot of questions. Now you got everybody calling the superintendent and all those good wonderful things. So it's, like you said, the description is very, very similar. And I think that along with a bullet for requirements and, along with the description and knowledge and skills, meets everything.
So even though a marshal has, during that time, that small band has all the powers of a peace officer, I mean, really, I'm doing a little presentation right now that my first bullet says school marshals are not police officers. They are responders. Okay, I mean, if you get right down to it, I mean, they do all other kind of things, but what's gonna hit the pavement, if we have a Uvalde or something, is did they go in? Did they kick the door down and respond? And so my whole thought is, whatever, teachers, bus drivers, whoever, you're gonna be accountable for who you have in that position. Because you've trained them and you've licensed them, whether or not it says shall or can, there's an expectation, and now we know we're accountable. And I'm saying you better have somebody that's maybe a warrior and a sheepdog first, when you interview and have a program that verifies that up and beyond what's in statute. And so, I mean, we're not making arrests, we're not giving traffic tickets, although we do traffic and different things. But really that's, I would think that's, if we learned anything from Uvalde, that's kind of what it would be right there, my opinion.
So do you think it would be too detrimental or too restrictive to, or if it's a part of the committee's authority, can you say that this has to be a full-time position? This can't be a teacher who's armed? I mean, is that within?
I think so. Collins trained many educators, and educators, they're limited by their duties and responsibility. If you're a classroom teacher, what are you gonna do? Or we trained you to hunt and protect, all right? An area I protect you, okay? But, or are you gonna stay with your class? So there's a lot of things, but for people that don't have that, yeah, I think, and they're very capable. I mean, they're front brain. I'd say there's some sort, but especially people that are administrators, make a lot of decisions. It's like you've got a very mature cadet that makes front brain decisions. When you come up and you're responding to whatever it is, you're problem solving. You're deciding what's happening. Is this person a threat? You know how it is. And so they're pretty good at that. They just haven't ever had that training or in that thought capacity or had the ability to, as we know, everybody becomes, you're afraid at some point, and are you able to take fear and change it to a controllable emotion? I think law enforcement, military, everybody has that issue. And so that's kind of the issue with that. I think we've got great educators that can do it and administrators. I can put some out here right now, you would not be able to, I have 5 SWAT guys that are marshals. And I got some that are not. And some of those you would not be able to tell the difference. But that's not everywhere. I've got 850 employees to pick a small group and to vet that. Rotan ISD with 50 employees, I don't know. You know what I mean? Maybe not so good. And that's the problem. That's why they go to the Guardian. They don't go to the Marshal too.
Exactly, and you make a good point. John did as well. And I think that is one thing to consider is when we do that job description, when you guys come up with that, is this a an employee who is just a school marshal, like that's just what they do, or can it continue to be one that has other duties? But you make a good point, and I want to kind of make that distinction, because as I've been on board and as we've looked at this, people bring up to us, they ask us about guardians, what I need to do to get guardians, or about the marshals. And we tried to make clear, first and foremost, TCOL has nothing to do with guardians. That's not something that we look at or worry about. That is merely that the school district is saying, all right, you have an LTC, so you can bring your gun to campus. That is only that is with the campus there. And I think the good distinction, and you've already kind of said that, is for the dichotomy there for looking at the school marshal, I think, and I think this may be helpful for y'all. To me, the school marshal, there has to be an expectation, if it is a dual role or a standalone role, they would be expected to leave where they are and go hunt down and put a stop to the active threat. That's what we teach in alert training. Is ideally, if you've got a second person with you, the two of you go, but if you don't, you've got to go on your own and you've got to go and stop the threat. Where that guardian that might be a school teacher, they don't have any extra training, they have very limited training, they've been through the LTC class with an instructor to get their license to carry. That's a person who, a teacher perhaps, that is going to, do the lockdown, stay and just guard the kids that he or she's got right there by them. So that's not the same thing at all as, aside from the licensing, it's not the same mindset as the school marshal. They're simply going to hold what they got and just protect what's around them, themselves and their kids, whoever's around them, where the school marshal is expected to go find the threat and put a stop to it. So that is a clear distinction that I would propose, y'all are the committee, that this description should set out as an expectation. So hopefully that kind of gets you started.
I think some school districts think you gotta have 40 marshals or 40 whatever at every campus. And, I've always said, I want, if it's, one highly trained force, equal force against equal force. Now, sometimes it runs into square footage, how big, if you're a 220,000 square foot high school, and to respond in that area, it may take more than one or two. But I see little school districts say, yeah, we got 30 guardians. I was like, I don't have but 4 and 850 employees that I think we're capable of. As you know, one-time training is probably not good enough. It's in statute and minimal, calling them do a great job. But, that's a perishable skill, everything we do. I mean, our particular, we do firearms training twice a month and one tactical training a month. Because I'm scared to death, we're not gonna be confident enough to do what we're supposed to do. So some other security guard, whatever, that don't get any of that, or one-time deal, that's an issue, so.
There's a lot of marshals that
Don't.
we see them every 2 years, and that is their training. And part of that's economic driver, and part of it, elective on the part of, they can afford it, but they don't treat you. You guys train to a much higher level than the state minimum standard. We've been at this about an hour, if we wanted to.
You want to capture your comments before we do the break, or you want to wait till after the break?
Just to kind of piggyback on what you said, sir, the program that we run in Granbury, we hire guys specifically to be, we call them uniform marshals, but I guess we're gonna have to change that nomenclature now. But, and then we have teacher marshals, and those teachers are taught to, if you're in a classroom and you hear gunshots outside, you're gonna barricade that door and you're gonna protect those little ones that you're with. You're not expected to go out and leave those kids unprotected, because if that gunman makes entry into that classroom that you were just in, we're worried about the liability. But so we have guys in a full blue geared up uniform at every campus, and in some campuses we have multiples. So those are the guys that are free to go and address the threats. We also lean more towards administrators or other people in that building that aren't tied to a classroom, so that they can also not be restricted to just those 28 kids that are in that classroom. So that, I think what you said rings true and makes a lot of sense, and maybe there would help to have a distinction in our job description for that.
And I think what you just described is consistent with what the training does. I mean,
Right.
We will never tell somebody to abandon these kids and go hunt the shooter. If you're responsible for these kids, we can't make that responsibility go away. Can you get someone else to cover it and then you go? But that's the precise model. If you're responsible for a group of kids, you're not gonna go chase. And so your administrators, your counselor, people who aren't tied generally to that role or responsibility make better hunters.
Yes, sir.
So they're not abandoning somebody.
Let's take about 10. Then when we get back, let's talk about the job description, the generic ones that excuse me, my allergies are killing me. You gotta love Austin. We've got 3 different job descriptions, and I did just a little bit of research on my own. And I just wanna know, I'm gonna give this to you, Colin and Greg, and see if y'all think this is kind of on the right track. It may not be, it may be too far out in left field or right field, and who knows, but just a little bit of homework I did. So let's take 10. Now, something I was talking to Colin about right before we went on break was the generic job description that's up on the board for the Texas peace officer, the Texas jailer, and then the Texas the telecommunicator. And if you notice on the pages that you have, all the generic stuff, it's a page and about a page and a half. Doesn't get off into other things that maybe we should be, looking at. I did just a little bit of homework beforehand, and the job description for school marshals was its title. This is by no means the perfect plan, but I think it'll help if we look at the generic and then maybe get some ideas off of here. We might be able to put something together that's a good piece of work or a good piece of paper. So with that said, I will let Colin talk about the Texas peace officer one that he and I were discussing. If you don't mind, sir.
Certainly. The generic job descriptions that you've been given, the use for those is primarily law enforcement academies that are open enrollment. That was the target for those job descriptions. If you look at psychological or medical evaluation, it has to require before they enter a BPOC. Now, Houston, Dallas, DPS, they're hiring somebody and they're putting them through a full background, and then they're training them internally in their proprietary academies. They are generally gonna give the evaluators the cities or the counties or the state's job description for that task. Because we have a lot of open enrollment police academies that are required. Again, the evaluation is the same, but they don't own the student. So we needed to come up with a generic job description to provide that role so that open enrollment academies could present the job description. And that's done across all 3 of the licenses. I think as John pointed out earlier, the Marshal's probably gonna be closest to mirroring some of the things we expect of peace officers, because in that tiny, that narrow time frame, they have all the duty and authority of a peace officer for that when the bad event starts. Certainly we can expand, I think, the constable, did everybody get the handout that the constable provided? I think he may have some more meat that maybe transitions from one to the other. And the nice thing about this is I think we can go through and say, yeah, this applies, this doesn't, kind of strike it by line. And then what we'll have at the next meeting is we can draft it and get it out so that, again, we may only need, say 1 more meeting unless you wanna try and dice it today till 4 o'clock.
No. I have another meeting to get to.
Yeah. I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
He gets to go testify before Senate Finance.
You gotta go talk about money.
Thrilled.
What a thrill.
He has all our tokens. We're
Yes.
putting him up.
He's your hero
We're
today.
loose on the Senate. I think if we look at the Texas Peace Officer job description, you should have a copy, and we've got it up on the board. You know, if we massage the general description, you know, there's probably something like traffic does not apply. Marshals have no authority to regulate traffic. But I think the safety and security of persons, maybe you drop property. They really don't have a property interest, or you could leave property. But I think they are, obviously the intent is that they work as a first responder when the bad thing happens. So I think that still applies in that first line. Real simply going through knowledge, skills, and abilities, again, traffic doesn't apply. So they do have to have some knowledge or the ability to consume and digest criminal law, because their authority to operate under Chapter 9 of the Penal Code, they've got to be able to understand both their enabling statute, which is in Chapter 37 of the Education Code. Most of them is 370811.
Right.
Then you got it mirrored in private schools and junior colleges and other places. So I think criminal law and regulations, you know, agency policies and procedures, safety rules and regulations, I would probably strike, and again, this is Cullen's opinion, not the opinion of the Commission on Law Enforcement. Evidence collection and handling is probably not something that school marshals, as evidenced by the discussion we had recently with prosecutors, we don't want marshals collecting evidence. You know, I think there's some value in court systems and procedures. If the bad thing happens and they use deadly force, that's the beginning of a long relationship with one or more court systems. You know, so ability to use and care for firearms, they're trained to do that. I think that's a requirement. They are not chasing people nor operating vehicles in response to calls for service. So argue we could strike the next one. I think the ability to use appropriate physical and defensive tactics, although the training doesn't speak to that, I think there's a certain physical fitness level if we expect these people to respond. You know, so ability to administer first aid, they're taught stop the bleed techniques, tourniquet application. Those, in my mind, are key components. They're trained to do that. That's one of the things they have to redo in their 16 hours is keep fresh on that. So I think that's a reasonable expectation. Certainly communicate effectively, provide guidance to others, make appropriate decisions under stress. I think you could go down the rest of those abilities and they would probably apply arguably to all adult human beings. So is there something that based on what the constable has done, are there knowledge, skills, and abilities that need to be added to that list that are unique for the marshal position would be a question I have.
Yeah, what I did is I was a school resource officer at Travis County. I was the first one for Travis County, and we didn't have a policy or procedure. So I thought back, I looked back at what situations I had, what I had to deal with, and we actually wrote a policy and procedure for it. But that's where a lot of this came from, is what direction I wanted to look and research. Google's a good friend of mine, and figure out what I might want to add to it. And of course, my law enforcement experience. And if you look at what I've put together, a lot of it's already on here, just not written out like mine is, because I didn't know what exactly we were going to put together. So with that said, even if it's not on what I've done, if you've got something on your mind that we need to put in there, let's do it. So how do y'all want to do that? Do y'all want to, everybody has a copy of all this? I'll email this to you when I get to the office. And, do we have this on email? Has it been sent?
It's available on our website, so
Okay.
we can certainly email it.
That way we can have something we can work off of, and then everybody starts submitting your ideas and your takeaways from it. Does that sound like a good game plan, or?
Real quick, Constable, I'd like Aaron, our assistant counsel, to kind of talk to us. One of the things we have to watch is quorums and communication because of the Public Meetings Act.
Right.
That's right. So most of you took the Open Meetings Act training. The members who haven't completed it, please complete it as soon as possible and submit it to us. As part of that training, outside of publicly noticed meetings, you can't operate in a quorum, and so communicating through email,
Right.
we should limit that as much as possible. You can create subcommittees if you want of less than a quorum, so maybe 3 or 4 individuals if you're looking at specific situations, specific job tasks for the committee. But what we can do is everyone can leave this meeting with this information that you provided, and we can also send a link for the peace officer job description, which is also on our website. And you can do your own research and come back to the next meeting prepared to discuss what you found, what you think.
Can communicate us.
They can communicate directly with us. Yes.
Yeah, so if, in other words, if you wanted something to go to the committee members,
Mm-hmm.
you could transmit that to
Okay.
us, and then us transmit it back out to the individual members, rather than you get everybody's email and send everybody something.
Right, yeah, we should refrain from kind of the reply all to everybody in the committee. So if you want to communicate directly with us, and if we need to, we will communicate directly with you two on specific matters. And for the upcoming, whenever the next meeting is, we're gonna have to create an agenda. So what we'll do is we'll have an agenda prepared, and then we'll present it to you two for final review, recommendations.
Okay.
And if we see anything that other committee members have brought to us, then we can address it in
Okay.
those communications.
So key takeaway is communicate with Aaron.
Sure, and Cullen too.
And Cullen.
Yeah,
Colin's a good-
Aaron,
Yeah,
Colin's a
okay.
given, so, okay.
Yeah, well, anything you think adds to the conversation, or any research you do, or ideas, agenda items, or something specific you want to see on the agenda. What we've been doing with most of these committees, if you look, this is a pretty generic, broad agenda, which allows you to do, as evidence, pretty broad discussion under these topics. So, we will probably use something similar in most cases, based on y'all's approval. So we don't box ourselves in. But if there is something specific, especially something you think needs a vote, we'd like to add it to the agenda.
Maybe help to Cullen, for either presiding officer or the chair, or for us to send out, if we haven't already, maybe we have, the statute that specifically deals with school marshals for some of those that are less familiar with it. I know we got a public member and a couple other people that, if you have read it, it may have been a while since you read it, but that'd be good for us to send out.
It's changed a lot too.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So,
Is the training that they go through 80 hours, correct?
minimum.
The training that they go through, I'm assuming, so we don't over or repeat ourselves too much. Is it possible to see the actual, what the training is that they go through, just in case it's something that needs to be on here? Curriculum, thank you, sir. That needs to be on here, or what have you?
Yeah, I mean, we can get committee members, student manual.
Teeks has done a pretty good, we got to get with it.
I think it's important that as we commence on this entire process, just from my perspective as a academy that's teaching the school marshals, I think it's important to keep in mind that who's sending the school marshals? What is this, who are we serving? And there are large ISDs and junior colleges that have a lot of resources and have the ability to hire and train people that this is their only function, is to be a school marshal. But I would say the majority of the people we're seeing in our classes are from a rural ISD or a, just lost the word, charter school, where John Doe is attending the school marshal class, but he's also teaches science. He's also the football and basketball coach. He also drives a school bus. So when we look at these duties, and it says things, and I'm just picking something off the top here about, patrolling the campus or ensuring, the safety. There are a lot of schools that don't have a person that can do that. As far as mandating that that's the school marshal's responsibility. So I think we just need to be careful that we don't enact some type of policy that then these rural districts, they can't comply with because their personnel are so limited. We've seen this time and time again in the training where we get a lot of retired officers that come in and they have a really hard time understanding that little phrase that says, in this period of exigent circumstance where the life of students, faculty, people on campus is in danger of serious bodily injury or death, they have the powers of a peace officer. But other than that, they have no power whatsoever. They're just basically somebody that's allowed to carry a gun on a school campus and exempt from the places weapons prohibited section in the penal code of carrying a firearm on a school campus. Other than that, they're just like every other citizen. So a citizen would have the same power of arrest in situations where a felony is occurring within their presence or view. And there is no misdemeanor that a school marshal would be responding to, because if it's serious bodily injury or death, then that's going to be almost always a felony type offense. So I just think we need to keep in mind that we're not only serving the larger districts that have the resources that we've been discussing so far. We haven't mentioned these smaller entities, and I don't want to exclude them from consideration on when we come up with policy.
Would you require that we have a separate heading where it's like for which one has the uniform to marshal and then the teacher, where it's like a different heading?
Like categories?
Yes, so that way the uniform marshal does this, but the ones that operates as a bus driver, teacher, and all those other entities?
But there is no distinction in the law that says a uniformed school marshal versus a
Other one.
concealed carry, because the law says, until we had a recent Attorney General's opinion, the law said that they had to carry the weapon concealed. They were not allowed to open carry. And then the Attorney General's opinion came out and said they can open carry if they carry it in a duty rig. But it doesn't say anything about a uniform.
Okay.
So,
So, but earlier we were saying that yes, they hold a license but the school can actually do the category or categorize whatever role they play.
absolutely. The school could have a distinction that says school marshals that's their full-time job, or that are open carrying a firearm, they're expected to patrol the campus. But if it's Mrs. Smith in her English class and she's concealed carrying, do we want to put that burden upon Mrs. Smith that says in the policy she's supposed to patrol the school? Because that's not, in my view, a realistic expectation.
Helen?
I think two notions come to mind. One, this is generic, hopefully will apply to everybody. But even if you look at the one for peace officer, it says patrols and detects violation of state laws. Well, you've got probably half of Lubbock Police Department doesn't do that. They're no longer on patrol. They're in a support function, they're in CID, they're doing something. So I don't think we're writing policy here as much as that job description. What may be asked of a school marshal, I think, is the question we're trying to answer. It's not that all marshals have to do all these things. So again, we're giving this to a psychologist to evaluate whether this person's temperament, their predilection to action, some of those things is this person a right fit psychologically? Right now, again, there's no requirement, statutory requirement, that they have any physical examination. We've had school marshals that were, new language or something. They were physically disabled. They had, above the knee amputation. They walk with an obvious limp. We've had some folks with different mobility. We've had school marshals in the early days come in on a scooter. And we trained them to the best of our ability based on what we were sent. That the one I'm thinking of actually self-selected, is that I can't do this. I thought this was just me riding around with a gun. No, this is gonna get really active. You're gonna scooter down the hall after this active shooter who's shooting at you with paint marking cartridges. And they self-selected out of the training, so that person didn't get to the end. But I think, I appreciate that not all marshals do the same thing, but I don't think this imposes that on them. But I think we've gotta give that psychologist some insight into what this person may be expected to do as a result of taking this role. I think that I agreed with myself, I guess. Under the knowledge, skills, and abilities, I think there was a lot of head nodding and this applies and this applies and this applies, and there may be a couple more we need to add. I think where we're really gonna diverge from the police description is in work performed. Okay? They're not driving emergency response vehicles. They're not conducting criminal investigations. So I think that's where the divergence comes. The basic knowledge, skills, and abilities, in my mind, need to be very similar between a peace officer, and I think John pointed this out earlier, that a lot of this stuff is the same. We have the same expectations when the bad thing happens. But what does a daily job look like, which is the work performed? That's where we're gonna need to massage this thing, and I think that's something you've given us more information on. I think some of the stuff in your document probably speaks to that. And so one thing, just from a clerical thing, if you look at the 3 job descriptions, they all take kind of the same path. It would be our preference that our final product kind of look like the other 3. That does a couple of things for us. It simplifies it on our end, but it also, the same psychologists that are doing peace officer exams, and we want them to do the marshal exam, are seeing a similar document. So they have all 4 This will be the fourth, for people that are doing evaluations.
So can I ask, so it's in there, you know, about commission standards. So how does TCO, what is your opinion? I mean, I think that's, we've had that from the beginning, that the marshals follow commission standards. What are those, and, you know, how does that apply? I think that's a separation too from other jobs.
If you look at commission standards, what they're generally talking about is the minimum standards to obtain the license. Criminal history, no disqualifying criminal behavior, psychologically sound in the case of marshals. So that's generally what they're pointing back to. There's not a, the other standards would be you must pass the training. In other words, to get to the marshals take a state licensing exam, although they don't do it in the same manner. It's at the end of the course. To sit for the licensing exam, you must complete all the training. So that's when it points to state standards, that's generally it, not so much a physical or psychological standard. If you look at the rule that deals with the psychological examination, it's more prescriptive on the doctor and the process than it is the content. Must use 2 scales, must, look for psychopathology and personality. And so, most of them use the MMPI or the series of tests. So that when it points to standards, Greg, that's what it's talking about. I gotta, Aaron,
That's the
Aaron
one.
said yes, so.
Aaron's the one.
Longer gave the head nod.
Good.
Always look to your attorney.
It looks like Aaron's gonna be our go-to guy, isn't he?
He hasn't kicked me under the table yet.
Yeah,
Normally we have skirted tables, so you don't see the attorney.
no sidekicks or nothing?
Yeah.
Not today.
Anybody else having something they want to share?
Oh, one last quick question. You were touching on the evidence, them knowing they won't have full range evidence, understanding, got it, but if they are that one person that goes in, they take down the shooter, we'll expect them to secure the weapon, right?
Yeah, they have
So
the
they'll have
powers
to have
of
a
it.
basic-
And during that
Yeah.
time, they would have those powers as.
So
License
just
to be
basic
something.
understanding
Basic.
of evidence and chain of command.
Yeah, well,
You would hope the training.
and most of that,
They get that.
from a mechanical standpoint, they're not securing evidence, they're making the environment safe.
Safe.
Right.
Stop it.
So we don't, Jim, it's been a while, you might be able to help me. We don't talk a lot about care, custody, and control, chain of evidence, because of the very short period of time. Marshals have 80 hours, and a lot of it's dynamic. There's a lot of time spent. We teach them building search, we teach them dynamic entry, we teach them, threshold evaluation and all the alert stuff. And for many of them, not all, but for many of them, that is an absolutely new skill set. And so there's a significant amount of training spent on those physical skills and ultimately the
Even
firearm.
going hands-on is, that's maybe a little higher level skill, which depends on your provider or your group. Or what are you gonna do, we spend time.
Handcuffing is not in the curriculum.
It's not in the curriculum anywhere.
Yeah.
But is there a need, you got people dying, what are you gonna do? So you have to react, and probably based on your experience, if you're previous law enforcement, maybe, but it's not in the training, it's not in the curriculum, it's not.
Yeah, so some things that some people just kind of narrow it even more. Some things that are not in the curriculum. There's no self-defense. There's no arrest and control tactics like you would normally have. Handcuffing and those type of things. So those are missing components that we would probably not see in the work performed. The taking people into custody. I know they have the authority to detain and arrest, again, when the bad thing's happening, but they're not taught to do that. And most of the time, that is detention at distance at gunpoint, waiting for law enforcement. It is not, I'm gonna go pounce on the person and apply handcuffs, especially if I'm alone. Because they're not trained in that skill set to close, they have no intermediate weapons. You know, law doesn't preclude it, but nor does it authorize any intermediate weapons. And there's no intermediate weapons training, so they don't have baton, taser, OC spray, any of that stuff that a peace officer would normally have. And certainly it's not spoken to in training. Not to say some of them may have some of those things, but it's neither statutory nor is it precluded, would be another way to look at it.
And in that generic description, obviously the expectation for that isn't there. Now, you get more local in it, you go above and beyond, perhaps that's.
Like ballistic shields,
Yeah,
breaching, I mean,
yeah.
we have all that, but that's not a requirement. Matter does that.
It's basically a blanket of what's needed.
Yeah, if you'll go up to just put examples of work performed at the top, great, just like that. I think we did pretty good going through the knowledge skills section. I think if we look at this, and we either take things out or, you know, turn them into something that relates to markets. You know, controls and detects violations of state laws, local regulations. Certainly, they have no authority to issue citations. In fact, every time Texas writes a law, it's one of the things they write is, you may not enforce the transportation code. That was in the original bill. It's like, wow, we get it. Why would you? They were very explicit. Again, serve, search, and criminal arrest warrants, not a thing for marshals. Arrest processes and transports offenders, probably not. They might be on the front end of that arrest under their limited authority, but they shouldn't be transporting and processing prisoners into a county jail.
A lot of that would come out.
But I look at, you know, the constable's document and you look at core competencies under crisis management. And these may be things that maybe we expand the knowledge, skills, and abilities section. But I think there's some valuable stuff in here.
There is, you know, they do have the ability to prevent with the knowledge they have, just like, so, example, student with a gun. So he hasn't displayed the weapon. I mean, we had one in October, we took control of the weapon and the individual. I don't know what authority we have other than to prevent or obey. That would be my thought, because with the knowledge we had to do that, we certainly were gonna wait. And so, that, how that comes in there, but that actually, he wasn't actually committing an act or had not displayed the weapon, but had it on his person. So I don't know.
I think one of the, certainly one of the examples of work performed would be the response to active shooter.
Yeah.
I mean, they're expected to respond as a first responder to an active shooter or active attack event. To prevent, you can actually use some of the statutory language.
I would imagine something along the lines of remains vigilant and observes, whatever, something along that line where you're looking for the school marshal I would think, again, an idea should be looking for
Active
possible attack
surveillance.
situation.
Yeah, I think again, if we look at, you know, Constable Anderson's document, the very first thing under safety and security, monitor school premises to prevent and respond to potential safety. I think that's a reasonable expectation of work performed, potentially performed by a school marshal. Again, if we look at these as not every marshal has to do this, but some marshals do this routinely to conduct regular security assessments and implement preventive measures. I think you talked about that as being a key component. I think you said basically the same thing, is there's an expectation. So this person, from a psychological standpoint, has to be intelligent enough to do such things. I think something that might be helpful is if we focus on Constable Anderson's document. I think a lot of what he's done is the work performed. And if we kind of agree where we landed on knowledge, skills, and abilities, if we morph those two things, because I think there's gonna be some things that are gonna be common in our peace officer one in terms of work performed. First aid, for instance, surrendering of first aid is an expectation. But I think the constable has done a better job than a lot of what's in the peace officer job description. I think most of those things at some level come out. But I think there's a lot of good stuff in here, so maybe we go through this. If we look at safety and security, you know, 3 bullet points. Does anybody object to those being marshal, you know, things that marshal could reasonably perform? So if you're comfortable, and again, we can, if we get a sense of where we're going, we can draft this and then look at it in a subsequent meeting. Emergency response. Do marshals routinely develop and execute emergency response plans?
I think they would fall into the emergency, well, thinking of from my avenue, they would fall into the response plans that's developed for the agency that they're working with as opposed to developing. They will fall under possibly some of the training and response ways that they will already have intact.
They could be in all phase, it just depends. I mean, if you're using existing employees, like your administrators are involved in your emergency operation preparation, even at the campus level, maybe a district level thing, but it filters down. But your full-time marshals, I mean, that would probably be something, that would be the whole deal, the whole emergency operation plan. Kind of part of would be our job description too. So that answers it right there, I think. Potentially, they've got to know about it. I mean, they need to know what chain of command, basic ICS principles would be. Even if you're a math teacher, you're got to kind of know, what's going to happen in case you had an event. But that's taught in the curriculum. Cullen them teach that. Emergency response, emergency operation, they get it through the Texas School Safety Center. That's pretty available out there, a lot of sources to it. So.
And I think Jim pointed out correctly, there are marshals who don't even touch their school's emergency operations planning stuff. And that's antithetical to me, but that's a truism. We've had them say, look, they don't involve me in any of that stuff. It's this thing that they talk about, have to have, because the school safety center says you gotta send it to us, but I don't even know what it looks like. And they're on their 3rd re-up as a marshal.
Yep.
But again, if it's something a marshal may be reasonably expected to do, maybe they don't in all cases. I think when I'm looking at the 3rd bullet under emergency response, I think serve as a primary responder to active shooter incidents is a little more narrow. But I think, again, trying to get that psychologist is, I need to be comfortable that this person has the ability to run towards the gunfire while everybody else is hunkered down or running away. So I think if we're more specific there about the expectation that they will be a first responder to that, we can use active attack or active shooter, married to either.
Alert level 1, they're probably gonna get active attack probably now, so it's how they kind of start, because of using vehicles,
Division number
IEDs,
one,
yeah, you know how it is
They chase that thing around.
all the time.
I defer to the committee, but I'm not as certain that most marshals do a lot on community engagement. Again, there's a significant number that are still under the radar, they're confidential. You know, so, and I don't think that we lose anything, but I'm certainly open to suggestion about potentially that not making the list. Doesn't mean the school can't put that burden on Greg or whomever later.
I agree.
Participating in ongoing training, they have a legal obligation to do so at least every 2 years. Psychological fitness, I mean, that's statutory, we can certainly leave it in here, but, so, under training and evaluation, everybody comfortable with the participate in ongoing training? The second bullet, they go.
It's already a requirement, correct,
Yeah.
overall, cause they gotta do the 2 years, so it's kind of
Yeah,
repeating.
I mean, it's statutory, we can leave it in there. I think it's under confidentiality and professionalism, that applies to all adult human beings. Crisis management, how do y'all see those bullets? I think when we use the term ability, we're back up into, you know, we would add that to knowledge, skills, and abilities as opposed to work performance. I think that's kind of where you were getting at is core competence.
There's something pretty similar already in the police officer job description.
Situations of extreme stress and danger.
Yeah, I like the adaptability, almost like missing from the people. Because again, psychologists may be assessing somebody for their willingness to change or their willingness to, you know, alter. I guess one way to look under crisis management, or anything that would not be in our knowledge, skills, and ability. Or redundant.
So the first one, like we said, that one's redundant because it already says ability to, if we use the list on the police officer, it's the ability to deal with situations of extreme stress and danger. Those are similar.
And appropriate decisions under stress, the one right above there.
Would it be worthwhile to add something about traumatic situations as well? Potentially traumatic situations? If they're gonna freak out at the sight of blood, they're not gonna do as much good.
That's the last one in examples of work performed. List that says may be exposed to traumatic situations and graphic material. In the original peace officer one.
Last one.
Interpersonal skills, strong communication skills to effectively engage with students, parents, would that be the same as ability to communicate effectively and provide guidance to others?
Essentially, unless y'all like one language over the other.
I don't know how you word it, but I would prefer the ability, or the observation reporting. Operational skills to recognize potential threats and actively report incidents, but I mean, to me, I just wanna see some requirement that whoever this individual is participating daily in the arrival and departure of students and their families, just to develop a relationship with, better understand family dynamics, to identify a potential off day for dad or mom or whatever it may be. I don't know how to eloquently word that, but not hang out in the office and eat leftover Halloween candy, but to be on the curb, taking said child from guardians and identifying characteristics.
Guardians not being the.
Not guardian, yes, sir.
Not the,
Parental.
the parental guardian, yeah.
Brings up another question I had. During the training, is there anything about identifying, some of the red flags that are gonna lead to this active incident?
There's a little
History of
bit,
school
they use the Secret Service, the Secret Service pre-attack modeling and some of that, but it's.
So we, now, of course, we provide behavior threat assessment training, that's in law now. That's actually part of Senate Bill 11 and continued on. So each school district's required to have a behavior threat assessment team. That doesn't have to be a campus team, but a lot of them have involved. And usually if there's a marshal on there or your school resource officers, your law enforcement person, they're involved. They're required to have that training by law if they're on that committee. So I think the ones we've had through our training, we've trained about 28,000 school personnel so far since that started. If they're involved in any part of that security, they've been put on that committee and they've had to go through that. We haven't had to do a lot of that training in the curriculum, although they talk about traits and factors on active shooters. We do a history of school shooters. But we're way ahead of where we were in 2013 when TICO was writing the curriculum about knowledge and all that. So I don't know. I mean, that's a very important part because they just like everybody else. So I don't know how you put it in there.
Section in there about threat assessment.
Yeah.
In the new.
The newer, the
one
TIC
we
version.
One we
Updated.
updated in 2024.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, if we wanna take the observation and reporting descriptions, the constable's document, put it in the knowledge skills of KSA, the knowledge skills and abilities, kind of merge that, and we can sort of view that.
You talk a little bit about that when you are teaching it about behavior threat assessment, don't you?
There's a whole section on it.
Whole section on it, I remember.
Under problem solving redundant?
I think it speaks, ability to communicate effectively and provide guidance and make appropriate decisions, I think pretty cover it under that.
And ability to use appropriate force.
Under evaluation criteria, that would not normally be a section in a job description, but I think there's some value, like, mental and emotional resilience and handling crises would be a knowledge, that would be actually a skill that we can certainly list, kind of, John, speaking to your trauma.
Yeah.
So that having that person assessed for some level of resilience, we expect them to bounce back from that traumatic event.
So when you're speaking on the evaluation criteria, you're saying what is needed for the school marshal as opposed to on the police officers may interact with individuals with mental health, two separate things, right?
Think so.
Think, color reading, really under evaluation criteria, I think the bottom 4 bullets are at least at some level redundant to something that's already existing as we merge the two. But I don't think we speak to resilience as well. Looking
So kind of merge it in with your last bullet on the police officer one, may interact with individuals with mental health and emotional illness or may be exposed to traumatic situations, so kind of merge in their ability to glass to acknowledge, huh?
I think if we look at the work performed and we remove the patrol references, traffic investigation references, search and arrest, maybe we could perform disaster rescue operations. This is one of the things they're taught is rescue team, how to set up rescue teams on alert level 1. So, debris removal from the roadway, probably not something they would be assessed on. Contraband, that can prevent terrorist attack, disrupt criminal organizations, probably doesn't apply, but I think some of the stuff we bring from this would replace those. Administer first aid is an expectation. Probably don't want them answering legal questions. Well, most cops answering. Looking at the peace officer, what about the plans and participates in safety programs? I think
I think, the anonymous declaration, we would encourage that. And we would want to give them the ability to do that, whether they're a teacher, they should be the safety and security expert, whether they're the math teacher, football coach, because they, in some cases, volunteered for that job to protect and serve on that basis, it could be part of their, it would be at our, maybe that's a local, I don't know how you want to put it in there.
and then the required to work irregular hours and long shifts, isn't that public schooling in general one?
Some districts,
Interacting with,
some districts take their school marshals,
sir?
some districts use their school marshals for like football games and
Yeah,
travel with the team with the interlocal agreement with another district. And so I think that in that capacity, that is extra hours
Right.
outside of school hours.
That was it. We have that statute now. We're signing an MOU. And there's a lot of them doing that.
Yeah.
So I say,
Is there anything, is there a glaring gaping hole that's not covered in either of the two? I think you've given us I think you've given us to where we can probably merge these two things and bring back a proposed deal at the next meeting. So if you,
I think we can look at the two, go over what we discussed today, merge them, and then you can also review education code, make sure that I'm not missing anything, and maybe use some of the terminology from there if we need to.
It's a grand idea.
this is very helpful. I mean, this document is, I know it's gonna help our L3, but it helps a lot on a lot of things, I think.
I'm hoping it's useful for schools, either starting a program, doing Marshal 2, helping you define roles for people,
I'd save Katie some phone calls and emails, people are asking those questions.
Yeah, we want to make sure that the Marshal program is a viable option for school districts, either as hey, this is what's right for us versus our own police department or our local law enforcement can't. The SRO in with us, or the hybrid model, or hey, we have a police department, but rather than, extend, and hire 4 or 5 more officers, we're gonna get a cadre of school marshals, whatever it is, we just wanna make sure that we lean into it more than what TCOL has done historically, and it all starts with, codifying what is the school marshal. I think this is the first step in heading in that direction, so that it can be a utilized program.
you would like the staff to merge these two and get you the product of that, then we need to set the next meeting date and location.
I'm pretty flexible. Since I live right down the road, so. What's the next, how often do you do them? Every 30 days, 90 days,
We
45 days?
as soon as every 2 weeks,
Okay,
and for the next meeting, it's up to you if you want
Gotta give
the ability
notice.
for people
yeah,
to
we gotta give that notice.
video conference in. It's not one we had for this meeting, but we can do that. What will need to happen if we do have the option for video conference is that the presiding officer will have to be here or wherever the presiding officer is. That location will have to be open to the public, so the public could attend and get public comment potentially.
Same place?
Same
Yeah,
place
I
is
mean,
great.
I mean,
Right here is what we would prefer.
do we need, as a committee, do we need 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month?
When's it due?
It's all up to us.
So as part of the charge, we're hoping that the finished product is done by May 1st in order to be presented in our June commission meeting. And that would be presented by the presiding officer, assistant presiding officer, and anyone else who wants to attend the meeting can show up.
About March 4th. Gives you all 30 days to, is that too long off? How long do you need to clean it up?
We can't do March 4th because we have a commission meeting that day.
That is the commission.
That's our
Commission,
next
your board.
commission meeting.
Gotcha. I just don't wanna hurt, you got other things to do too, I know, so,
If we,
18th.
I don't think
February.
it'll take us very long if you're working on us consolidating this, and getting it ready.
We can,
the 11th,
February?
how far is that, 2 weeks?
Shoot for the 11th of February.
10th and 11th, well, for me, 10th and 11th, I'm teaching alert.
Well,
But we've got Lehman
I'm not available.
on the 11th.
I'm good on the, on
12th.
Thursdays too.
Yeah, is there a day of the week
Mondays,
that's
Thursdays,
17th.
End of February.
17th's good for me.
I'm in risk management conference.
The 17th is President's Day, so the T-Cole's
Oh,
closed
yeah,
that
well,
day.
What about the week of the 24th?
25th.
On her birthday on the 25th.
25th, I'm gonna be,
that'll be nice, we'll have cake, not really, stay can't buy food.
I'm here on, I'm already in
We'll
town
all pitch in and get
on
you
the
a cupcake.
24th,
Yeah.
that's good.
From a vending machine.
From the
February, I got safety
Just check the
center board
expiration
meeting on
date.
Monday, that'd be good to have on Tuesday on this day.
So 25th?
I'm
24th,
good on the 25th, y'all.
24th, 25th for me, either one.
25th.
Either one's fine.
Mondays are bad.
Yeah, 25th would be good,
25th.
that'd be perfect.
25th looks good.
I'm sure it's fine, let's not worry too much about my schedule. Then-
February 25th.
Okay.
9 to 12, the same,
Not 30. I mean, do.
9:30?
I was gonna say, we could start at 10. I
Yeah.
think next time may be our conclusion meeting. If
We agree?
come in and you like the merger of the document and everybody can coalesce around that, then we'll vote it into being the output of the committee. So I think, it's probably something we could do between 10 and noon if you wanted, for those who travel,
Let's
give
do it.
them a little more flex. If you wanted to schedule it 10 to noon, that would be fine.
It could even be done in the afternoon at 1 or 2.
That was good for me.
I like the 10 to noon.
All right, 25th or 24th?
25th, I think, was the
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
what time?
10
10?
to 1, I guess, 2. Put a 4-hour window in there. I'll be done by that. If it's already drafted up, but I'll go
New Cosmos is Wednesday.
Oh, yeah.
28th.
Tyler,
Let's go see the road.
So we've got a time set up. We have an agenda, not put together, but an idea, what we want to merge. And I'll send you my copy. I'll email you that bill I put together. So I make a motion, we adjourn.
One final thing,
Okay.
we do have public comment on the agenda, so we just need to make sure that if there is someone here who is gonna provide public comment.
They're not public. They're all,
Nobody hiding in the back over there?
It doesn't look like it, but we just have to say it.
Okay.
and you
Okay.
got some.
Okay. All set?
I make a motion, we adjourn. Any discussion? No discussion? No discussion. All in favor? Motion carries. You're done.